And welcome back to your second Q&A of the night. Today we are going to be looking at all of your sabbatical candidates, and we are now on to VP DCI. Tom, what does that entail?
So for VP DCI we have two candidates currently running for this. We've got Chris McGeehan and Kerry Sclater. So the role entails all things serious and all things creative rolled into one. DCI candidates should expect to lead union elections in a year's time, but they should also be the leader of the creative industries zone, encompassing student media through to performing arts. So if we could welcome our candidates for VP DCI to the stage. Big round of applause for them, guys.
Hello, how are you guys doing?
Hi, good.
So Chris has joined us with wine in tow.
Definitely.
Kerry,
yeah.
refreshment free.
Yeah. Definitely more casual than the debates. If you just want to give a little quick introduction about yourselves. Kerry, do you want to start?
Hi, I'm Kerry. I'm a third-year English student.
I'm Chris. I'm a third-year biologist and the current student groups officer.
Lovely.
Brilliant. So we will kick off with one of the first questions that we've received. So this is talking about music societies. So do you guys think that music societies could play a bigger role in union events? So if so, how would you implement this change? So basically, the creative zones under your remit, do you think the music society should be promoted more around campus at events?
Do you want to go first?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, definitely. I think it's a shame that we don't see them getting more involved. When we have situations like, slightly odd support acts, like S Club. Well, it wasn't even S Club 7, it was like 2 of S Club, wasn't it?
It was Bradley
So we could have a situation where we have our talent and our student talent supporting big acts like that. And it also means that students get more of an exposure to like the massively wide, diverse and interesting range of student talents that we have. So for example, I've been to a couple of events where Folksop have performed. And, initially I was like, really? And then by the end of the night, everyone was like doing dances around, I think it was in here actually, yeah, and everyone was dancing around and like doing barn dances and stuff. So it's really cool if we can get students involved like that more. So I would like to kind of infiltrate student talent into the commercial side of things and give them that opportunity to perform on a sort of professional level so at our commercial events and broadcast them more.
Yeah, I mean, like, to sort of echo that, in my manifesto, which it was actually in the media part, I was talking about how SUSU as a business perhaps doesn't always utilise our student groups to the best that they can, because obviously we have like such a range of really talented music groups. So it would come a lot with the sort of communication side and liaising, making sure people know what's available and to tailor them for different events, so it's not just sort of shoehorning in student groups into random events. And also it could come a lot with collaboration between societies. So for example, like the Wessex scene, we've had events where we've used like student jazz bands and things like that. So again, with my manifesto, a big point is collaboration amongst the CI zones, but of course we would expand that to SUSU commercial events and other student events at large.
So you mentioned the commercial side of some of the societies. Do you think these societies should be treated the same way commercially with payment for taking part of these events, or do you feel like they should stick with the volunteer kind of aspect of it?
No, I think we should be willing to pay people. I mean, you don't expect S Club, again, to turn up and work for free, and our students quite often have a professional level of talent, and maybe they do work professionally or perform professionally, particularly where we have situations where people are perhaps, if they've gone away from the university for a bit and then come back, or if they've aren't current students anymore, if they're alumni but still live in the area and still work with, some of our student groups have alumni members, and so they can't work for free, and so we should pay people, we should pay creative talent. And so, I mean, as a photographer myself, this is something that I'm very clear on. I won't work for free. I don't do work for free because it takes time and it takes effort and it takes equipment to do these things. So I definitely think if we're in a situation where we have a commercial event and we would be paying a support act, even if it's a student group, we could look into paying them to do that. And I think that's potentially something as well that could be with the sabbatical review coming up. At the moment, there's not really a sabbatical who has I mean, the president.
You
kind
hold
of
on
has
that for 1 minute because the
commercial-
question is going to come up about that just
Okay,
in a minute's
okay.
time. Kerry, what did you think about the commercial side of Susie?
Well, I mean, I definitely agree with the ethos of that. If something's worth paying for and the student talent is, then we should pay. But I think you need to think more realistically about paying in terms of, for example, Union Films. Obviously, that's got a commercial side and a volunteer side. So before talking about paying certain people, we need to look at creating sort of a consistent stance on how to separate volunteering and commercial sides. But yeah, obviously I agree with the fact that we don't want to be getting people labour for free when we would pay external acts. But it just needs a bit more investigation first, I think.
So Amelia, onto a direct question this time. So who will it be?
So let's start with Chris. So you've mentioned a lot in your manifesto about how you want to improve the various media departments, and you've been quite specific. Which media department do you think needs the most work, and why?
Oh, that's difficult. I suppose, I think they need different things. I mean, if I was going to, I would hate to like.
This is the
pick
sofa
one.
of sharing, Chris. Come on.
Come
Yeah,
on.
I mean, I guess, I think some of them do fantastically well at some things and not so well at other
Can
things.
you give us some examples?
So, perhaps...
Which ones?
I told you she was going to be direct. I'm not lying.
So Union Films do really good at putting on a wide variety of events, but then sometimes they just don't get the numbers through the door, and then they don't meet their targets. So that's a question of sort of, well, should they have a target? Do we kind of care? Because it is a brilliant benefit to our students that we have a student cinema that is so cheap. So perhaps that could be considered. Perhaps something like CCTV don't do that many live broadcasts. They do Friday Night Live. They're doing this, but they don't really have sort of, and they've got, this year they've had Real something, the film review thing, which is kind of a regular thing. So that's really good, and perhaps more sort of things like that. Our media outlets, so like the Wessex Scene, don't necessarily cover, they don't have a role of holding officers to account and really investigating SUSU issues. I think perhaps that is less of a criticism of the Wessex Scene, but is a criticism of SUSU, because they're perhaps worried about what happens if they do that, and that's a problem. So maybe that's
Have you had
SUSU.
experience in any of these departments?
Well, I've had, I mean, I really like Union Films. I've been to Union Films loads of times. I've had a year pass every year I've been here. I've, again, dabbled around the edge of CCTV. But a lot of this stuff is something that I've seen as someone who's not so much involved, but is involved with SUSU. And all of the stuff that, you know, I can have all these opinions as a student, but that wouldn't necessarily mean that, it's not, as the VP DCI, it's not my job to tell the media departments what I want them to do. It's my job to work for the media departments and work for the student leaders and allow them to tell me what they want me to do, because the sabbaticals work for students rather than, I mean, everyone says about leading the zones, and I kind of feel like I should be led by the student leaders, and the student leaders can say, this is what we need help with. This is what, because they can do the operational side of stuff, and they know what they want to change and what they want to improve, and they can tell me, and I can be like, okay, I can go and do that for you. That's something that I can do.
Okay, so if we move on to another question sourced from Twitter earlier on. So both of you, this is a free discussion, so feel free to pitch in as soon as I've asked this. How will you support the next group of media student leaders to get the best out of their respective outlets?
Do you want me to start this time?
Yeah, sorry.
Okay, so, no, that's fine. Sorry.
This
Being
is
polite
very
on the
good for
sofa.
democracy side. Well done.
Being all democratic, who's going to go first? Yeah, I think it's obviously a big challenge with the media heads because there's a yearly turnover. So it would first of all come with putting things in place to create sort of established guidelines and consistency. So, as Chris has sort of mentioned, I wouldn't want to outline my plans for the media departments because it should be the media heads and their teams that put their plans in place, but I would put the initial support. So things like, I would make sure I'm well trained and give training to them on things like media law, so we can just push a little bit more in terms of digging a little deeper into SUSU. And I'd also give them sort of breakout sessions and training on how to ask for like freedom of information requests, how to sort of access budgets, talk to the SABs more, so we can expose a little bit more about our students' union, which we're really hearing is what students want to see from our media outlets.
I think that's perhaps a key role of the VPDCI, is kind of a link between the media departments and the other sabbatical officers.
Yeah.
So if there is something like, if someone's not doing their job, you can be like, okay, Serge wants to interview you, so come and talk to us about that. And perhaps if there was a potential for the sabbaticals to do like a regular show on Serge or a regular show on CCTV, and that can be one way of them holding the sabbaticals to account more.
Yeah.
And yeah, I definitely think, like, as you were saying, the student leaders will set like the direction for the year and set what direction you want to go in, what they need for the year, and then I can look at stuff like, in 5 years' time, if you want to have CTV doing 24-hour broadcasting and Serge doing 24-hour shows and such, and the Wessex scene and such holding officers to account really well and doing really in-depth features and things like that. So that's something to look at for long-term planning and what I can do and sort of what I've put in my manifesto. But then the student leaders
are actually doing a 48-hour marathon, and we've done one before.
Yeah, so stuff like that. And
I think as well, though, obviously you've like focused a lot on the long term. We do need to think on the short term as well. And training will really be a core part of this, not just for the people in the committees, but for all of the student volunteers. So making sure that all of the benefits of being involved with the media, so all of the sort of aspects towards employability, the skills you can pick up and the things for your CV can go right down to someone who's written one article or presented one show or whatever. So making sure that all the students can be more engaged with the media departments. That's a horrible buzzword, but...
Really briefly to wrap this up. So we mentioned how you can best get the best out of each media outlet. What is the one thing that you can offer? Because you mentioned holding them accountable. What is the one thing that you can offer the student leaders in each area? So a certain skill or anything that you've learned over the past year to actually get the best out of them? Kerry?
Definitely my experience with all the media departments, and also I sit on the committee for a national association of student media, so I've picked up a lot of other stories and ways that we can really help student unions support their media outlets.
And Chris?
I think definitely just getting stuff done once they've told me what they want me to do, because I have so much experience from sitting on the Creative Industries Zone and the Democracy Zone and too many union councils, like, I hate to think about that, lost count. Then I can just, I'm used to passing policy and I'm used to talking about policy and I'm used to talking about why union councils should pass policy. So I'd just be able to say, this is what we want you to do, and I'd be like, okay, done.
Brilliant. So Amelia, it's Kerry's turn.
It is indeed. So you state in your manifesto that you lack experience in democracy, but that will give you a better student perspective. But shouldn't you be more knowledgeable than everyone else who is a student, as that is your role and you're representing everybody else?
I think the thing is with knowledge that it can be taught, and I would be more than happy. I've already started, obviously researching the different aspects towards democracy in SUSU. So I think that knowledge is not necessarily, it's not hard to access when you get the role. But I think that my understanding of what students want is more important, because every year people say there are problems with democracy, and every year people try to present solutions as how we can change that, and it's not happened. And I think it's because people approach it more from the inside of like bureaucracy and democracy, and they try to access it from that rather than accessing it from the student's viewpoint.
Do you think you're perhaps running more because it's about creative industries and that's what you're interested in having knowledge in, rather than the democracy side, which is just part of the role, it comes with it?
I mean, definitely not. I obviously have more passion for the creative industries in terms of previous experience, but the other thing about being involved with the media is it does give you a lot of insight into how SUSU works. So it's not only being involved with the media, but it's helped me see things that have happened with SABs, different decisions that have been made. And when you sort of look at the engagement with the media outlets, particularly like comments on articles, the feedback we get about things to do with SUSU, you really get in touch with what people think about democracy. And yeah, so I think it's more about my understanding and skills of it more than the intricate understanding of policies and things like that that make me a good candidate.
Thank you, Kerry. So we can get on to this last question. I did promise this was going to come up, Chris. A SAB review is due to be taking place next year. I want to ask you guys, do you think that the current SAB structure works? Obviously, keep this as on point as you can, and just let us know, do you think, obviously, this needs to change, or is it okay as it is?
I think it's, like I've said before in my Surge interview, it's always worth looking at it on a regular basis, as we do, to make sure that we are focusing on what students really want us to focus on. And perhaps, like I brought up, we could consider having more of an impact on the commercial side of things, because increasingly our students seem to be complaining about that. And so there's the sort of situation, there's a place perhaps for more of those things to come in, and then we need to consider whether all of the SAB roles work, whether that's a case of increasing the number of SABs, which I'm kind of, as a student who's aware that there are 7 SABs and they take £21,000 of my block.
If we could just hear from Kerry quickly just before we move on to the next zone. Kerry, what did you think?
A lot of it would be to look into the overlaps, and again with perception of students towards SUSU, especially with, for example, VP engagement. It was originally called the VP F-all role. So because people don't really understand what they do, we need to look at why that is, sort of being concise with what they do actually achieve, making sure there's no overlaps. So it's definitely something that needs reviewing, but obviously don't want to make any quick decisions on it.
So I'm sure we'll hear more from you about that in the coming next week for your campaigns. Good luck with those. Everyone, can we give a big round of applause to your VPDCI candidates?
So we will be back after this short break with VP engagement. If you have any questions that you want the candidates to know, please write them down at the back, and we'll be back in 10 minutes.
Thank you.